All right.
Oh, I need this, huh? I probably, okay, I do need this? Okay, I really don't, but. Hi, everybody. I am Caty Royce, and I work at the Frogtown, Miss Donna. I work at the Frogtown Neighborhood Association. I've been there about 2 years. And before that, I worked as a director of a housing advocacy organization in St. Paul, but it was metro-wide, called the Community Stabilization Project. So in my space at Frogtown, it's also true of my space at the Community Stabilization Project. Kind of a core value of organizing for me and for folks that have organized with me is local control. And so that the people that are most affected by any given issue are the ones that get to define how that issue is organized around and worked on. And at the neighborhood level, it's pretty hard to do. Frogtown is the most diverse neighborhood, I think, in the metro. It's 30% African American, 30% white, 30% Asian, and about a growing 5 to 5% East African immigrants and Latino families and individuals. So it's extremely diverse. About 70% rental right now and 30% homeowner. So for us, when we look at those statistics, we demand of ourselves and of the organizing at the Frogtown Neighborhood Association that we do what we need to do to get the voices of different folks at the table. And usually that means working fairly intensively with either paid organizers or volunteers on the board who represent or come from those given communities to bring folks to the table to make decisions around issues and how to navigate those issues. And we are also very intentional about watching our whiteness. I am obviously white. I am. Sam Buffington, who works with us, is white. And then we have very white, I'm sorry to say. But I'm working on my whiteness.
That's important.
That's very important. If not, you should kick me out. And then Tia Williams is our lead organizer, and she's an African American woman. So we're very intentional about the voices in the room on making decisions. So say we were perfect about getting 30%, 30%, 30%, whatever the census data defines our neighborhood, and we get everyone in a room to talk about an issue, and guess who gets to talk the most? If you're not intentional about who gets to speak. And so we'll say things in meetings like, at the beginning of a meeting, not to point out to individuals, but to say at the beginning of meetings, usually in our culture, white people get to talk a lot, and we want you to watch yourselves. Police yourself, or, sorry to use the word police, watch yourselves, or we'll support you in watching yourself. And so in that way, people are ready to learn. And so that's one of the tools we've used. It's not easy to get folks to participate at the neighborhood level. People are tired. It's usually the end of the day. I mean, you all know the drill. So I think being really intentional and having it relationship-based, not transactional. So it's not about you come and we get something from you. It's we all come together and we build community. And so when you make it about relationships, it gets a little easier to come together and make decisions together. And so for us, equitable change, I guess, looks like change that everyone has had an opportunity to participate in defining and figuring out the strategies to shift it, and then the action to shift it. So being intentional on all those levels about, very seriously about making sure that all the voices are heard. Some examples of the work that the neighborhood has changed. I guess one of the last couple years, again, I'll speak to that, and if I can remember projects that occurred prior to me, I'll throw them in. Frogtown Farm. So has anyone heard about Frogtown Farm? Well, of course, Frogtowners. And so Frogtown Farm is this 13-acre site right smack dab in the middle of Frogtown that was owned by Wilder. Wilder had their corporate offices there before they went to their shiny new building on Lexington and University. And we approached them, me at the very tail end of the success of Frogtown Farm, but some leaders who are still part of the community, and I know them well now, approached Wilder and said, we want to buy that property, we want to buy that site from you. Wilder was not immediately interested. They thought they could get a bunch of money for a housing development, which never panned out. We increased the pressure and then worked with TPL and the city to buy that property. It's a 13-acre site. It'll be a city park and a farm. So an urban farm that's run by a nonprofit that it has been established. I'm on the board. We just hired our first director. Eartha Bell is the first director. She's going to be wonderful. And so that's one huge project. And to kind of meld the two questions, B and C, around kind of displacement or gentrification, there were a couple of white guys on the board at the beginning. One guy was from a bank, another guy had worked at a foundation, and almost every meeting I was new, right? So I was kind of being quiet for a little while, not long. But these guys would kind of talk about the project as, oh, and it's just gonna, it's gonna save Frogtown. It's gonna be the answer to Frogtown's problems. And you could just see this image in their mind of, I don't know what the image was. I didn't like the way it was said, the whole savior thing. And I think that as we got more community members onto the board, people that were actually living in Frogtown, those folks did not live in Frogtown, we were able to kind of shift the way that conversation, our internal conversation, is about the farm and who's going to benefit from the farm. Mm-hmm. And so uppermost is the community members that live in Frogtown will benefit from the farm. And I think watching those internal conversations of organizations is an important way to help maintain local neighborhood control of projects. Again, that's kind of hard to do. It takes a lot of intentionality. Super important, though. We've also started a development company, so an LLC that's doing very small number of properties per year, and it's called Preserve Frogtown, and it's a combination of Historic St. Paul and the Frogtown Neighborhood Association. And what we're doing with the project is not just rehabbing homes, but we're choosing homes that have special cultural significance to the working class neighborhood that is Frogtown, and claiming the sacredness of that, kind of redefining what's historically significant from Summit Avenue to some of the people that built the homes on Summit and then came home to Frogtown and used the scraps from Summit to build some of their own homes in Frogtown. And that's a wonderful story, and it's a beautiful story, and it's one that we should uphold as much as we uphold Summit Avenue. And so there's at least two prongs goal of the Preserve Frogtown. We're rehabbing a home. We got our first one rehabbed and sold on 452 Thomas. We did not use $200,000 of subsidy to do it. We used about $80,000. We did a lot of reuse, which is another piece of what we're trying to do, is saying, okay, so the whole shiny new stuff, we need that. But we also need to kind of love, in a soft reuse way, some of those homes, and how can we do that and not take up $100,000 to $200,000 in subsidy per project. And so we did that successfully on Thomas, and one of the conversations, again, melding this B and C question, one of the best conversations I saw happen in Frogtown in this past year was when we talked with a neighborhood community group. It was probably an internal committee. It's probably 15 people, and it was pretty well reflecting the neighborhood. And renters and homeowners both, longtime homeowners, some of whom that were founders of Frogtown Farm, for example, Sweeney and Setu and some other folks, and we were talking about what should we put the purchase price at. So here's what we use to rehab. What do we want? We could sell it maybe for a little bit more. Do we want to do that? And I saw folks that had lived in the neighborhood for quite a while, renters, some new renters were at the table, and some longtime homeowners. And the conversation came down to, it started the way you'd think it would. Hey, we need affordable housing. It should be as low as we possibly can. And then some of the homeowners, again, because they're in relationship and it's safe space, looked at each other and said, I know, we do need affordable housing. I don't want you to move out of the neighborhood. I want to make sure that you can still live here 10 years from now. But I've owned my home for 30 years and I have no equity in it. And just that kind of honest conversation, and the renters looked at them and they looked at each other, and a little more conversation about, so we still need affordable housing. Yeah, but I need equity. And we came down to a middle ground. We didn't up the price too much, but we sold it at $139. And that was one of the best conversations I saw happen in kind of decision making around who benefits and how do all of us benefit. And that was super important. And so some of the other work that we've done that I would say is about ensuring non-displacement of Frogtown residents. Part of that Preserve Frogtown is you get this really nice looking house on this block of 452 Thomas, and the rest of the block is pretty rough looking. So we took special efforts, and we'll do this on every property that we rehab, to reach out to the other members around a 2-block area, homeowners and tenants, to say, here's where you can get some money to do some rehab if you might need it. Do you need it? Can we help you? We filled out 2 applications for some rehab loans on that same block, so that everyone is benefiting and helping to figure out where landlords can go to get money. Not the big, I own 100 units, which some people do in Frogtown, and don't put any money into it. Not, the investor guys and gals, but mom and pop who are own 2 or 3 properties, and we want to keep those renters, those tenants. I never say renters. I don't know where that came from. Tenants where they're at and at an affordable rate. So we're trying to I don't know if we're going to get away with it, but if you get a certain loan, then you have to keep your rents at this rate for a certain number of years. So getting into some kind of semi-policy with private landlords, we'll see if it works. Again, it's all about relationship. So watching those things. And the other thing we're somewhat concerned about is the land bank purchased for us the Victoria Theater, which is on University. And it's going to be fantastic. So it's going to be rehabbed to be performance space, but community owned. So it's going to be a co-op of community members that own that collectively, but it'll be community performance space. So that's fantastic. It's one of our best projects. We're super stoked about it, but could it be an agent of gentrification? Is it one of those things we're doing that could force that home values around that area up? And it could. And so what we've said is we're going to watch that. We have to be intentional about figuring out, and we don't have all the answers. Nobody does, because we're in this whole new phase, right? But if you're intentional about watching that and saying, what can we do to balance that, I think we can figure it out. We've got a lot of really smart people around us that can help us do that. So blah, blah. I can take questions later.
And we'll have time for questions at the end.